The winter meetings is in full swing and guys are landing all over the place. We are seeing outfielders go, which is concerning to the Mets as they're still trying to place Brandon Nimmo. And more importantly, the price of starting pitching is insane right now. Taijuan Walker gets a big deal with the Phillies. How are the Mets going to replace him and Chris Bassett? Is it simply returning Chris Bassett? A lot to discuss on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, Taijuan Walker has to be our first story of the day because he went to the Phillies. If Taijuan Walker signed with the let's just say the Dodgers, the Cardinals, the Cubs, we really wouldn't care too much about him leaving the New York Mets, but he goes to the Phillies. And before we get into the money, because that'll lead into the next segment, let's just discuss the fit. On the Mets, Taijuan Walker is not necessarily good enough because the Mets need to get a 3. You know, they have Carlos Carrasco as a potential 4. They have David Peterson as a potential 4. Now, I did a podcast a couple weeks ago where I, teased the idea of Peterson as a 3. And really my point of that was I could see David Peterson taking another leap next year. And let's just say you were to get whatever mid-rotation arm, someone in the Taijuan Walker class, whether that be even a Chris Bassett, a step above that. I could see David Peterson with his strikeout stuff ascending by the end of the season and being a guy you trust in a playoff game, whether that be as a 3 or a 4. But you're not trusting him to be your 3 on opening day. So even though I like Carrasco and Peterson as options, even though I think McGill is due for a bounce back after what was a bad year due to the injury and, the lack of performance after a great April, you have to get that 3 locked in. And you hate the idea of having to trade for a number 3, but it's starting to dry up. And so Taijuan Walker was a potential option, but you didn't love him in that 3 role, because the last 2 years, while Taijuan Walker was great in the first half, it was a 2.55 ERA, I believe, the first half of 2021, then an ERA over 7 second half. First half this year, it was actually, no, I think it was 2.66 his All-Star season in 2021, 2.55 this year, even better in the first half. Second half, he wasn't bad. It was 4.80, so I guess he wasn't good either. I mean, he was slightly below average in the second half. The net result was a 3.49 ERA. He gets paid big time here. With the Mets, I don't think he was good enough. With the Phillies, because they have Ranger Suarez, this is the perfect fit. Is it, in some respects, an overpay based on what I thought a pitcher like Taijuan Walker would command? You would say yes. But then you're seeing the other pitchers on this market get paid, and I think it's in line with what he deserves based on the fact that he went out the last 2 years and he pitched 150-plus innings. And that is a commodity in baseball right now that is getting dollars. So Taijuan gets a bag here, and with the Phillies as their 4, that's a dangerous team. I mean, Taijuan just proved that he can hang and give you a lot of quality starts in the National League East. They now plug him into a team that, with Trey Turner in place, should be able to put up a lot of runs. They have 3 guys in place. I do think that the Phillies might experience what we saw from the 2015 Mets, the 2019 Nationals. When they get to that next year, you can see these guys burned out. So what is Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola going to look like after the workload that they just put up to get their team into and through, whatever it was, 6 games of a World Series? Ranger Suarez pitched a lot this year. So how are those guys going to bounce back is a big, big question mark for this Phillies team. But if you assume that there are going to be the same guys that were this year, and you put Taijuan Walker in the mix, and then you add Trey Turner up the middle, with the addition of the things they did throughout the season to get better. Bryson Stott making his debut and then really getting acclimated. You expect him to be better. Getting Brandon Marsh is a nice addition in center field. Alec Boehm showing improvements. The Phillies are a legitimate team to be a little bit nervous about. So that Taijuan Walker signing, I think it's interesting because if the Mets signed him to that exact contract, I would say, I don't like that. And then for the Phillies to sign him to this contract, I'd say, wow, I actually like that deal for them. And certainly for Taijuan. You can say the Mets made a mistake by not offering him the qualifying offer, and I actually now can go back and with hindsight say I was wrong in that. I thought that you would not like Taijuan Walker to pick up and accept that qualifying offer. But if you told me right now you could have Taijuan Walker back in the rotation for $19.56 million, I'd take that. I really would. And I honestly think he would have taken the qualifying offer. I don't think that he probably even expected to get paid this much over that many years. I mean, $18 million a year for Taijuan. Sure, if it was 2 for 36, 4 for 72, that is a lot of money for Taijuan Walker. So I think ultimately that might not be a great contract for the Phillies, but for their next season, they're in good shape. And the Mets now have to pivot. The problem is, where do you pivot to? Because apparently the guy that they had their eyes on, Jameson Taillon, seems like he's going to the Cubs as I record this at exactly midnight. I guess technically on Wednesday morning. So we're going to discuss the skyrocketing price of starting pitchers and what is left for the Mets. Before we get to that, though, today's episode is brought to you by SimpliSafe. At Locked On Mets, we believe home should be where you and your family feel safest, especially over the holidays. And this season, give yourself and your family the gift of peace and protection with the #1 rated home security system in SimpliSafe. Right now, our listeners can get 40% off a new security system, but don't put this off because you're going to want SimpliSafe. In an emergency, there's 24/7 professional monitoring agents who use their Fast Protect technology to capture critical evidence and verify that a threat is real, so you can get higher priority police response. SimpliSafe is a whole home security system with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and out, with smarter ways to detect motion that alerts you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. The 24/7 professional monitoring service costs you under $1 a day, which is less than half the price of traditional home security systems. With the top-rated SimpliSafe app, you can stay in complete control of your system, arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your camera, or adjust the system settings anytime, anywhere. Don't miss your chance to save big on your favorite security system. Get 40% off any new system at SimpliSafe.com/LockedOnMLB today. That's SimpliSafe.com/LockedOnMLB. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Now, the price of starting pitchers is ridiculously high right now. Just discussed the Taijuan Walker deal, $18 million a season. I think Jameson Taillon, who apparently is going to sign with the Cubs here, should be getting something similar. Very similar metrics, stats, innings pitched between Taillon and Taijuan. So while I know the Mets were really keen on adding Taillon, I'm not necessarily mad if he ends up getting north of $16 million or north of even $15 million over 4 years. It's a lot of money for a middle of the rotation starter. But what are you left with? Andrew Heaney signs with the Rangers. He probably has some money on the table almost. He didn't have the dependability that a Walker or a Taillon has, so maybe that's why he got less. He did get incentives in his contract to sign with the Rangers and join what is now the highest ceiling, lowest floor rotation in baseball, because we know that there's the injury risk of Jacob deGrom. And then you also have now Andrew Heaney, who struck out 35.5% of the batters he faced this year, but certainly has not been consistent throughout his career, and didn't even throw 75 innings this year. So he signs with them. Incentives can push that up to $37 million. Interesting contract. But the Mets were in on him this offseason. Now he's off the board. So what's left? Where are we looking here to solidify the Mets rotation? There's really two names that jump out. It's Cody Bellinger and Chris Bassett. Now the problem is Senga, you could look at like a 6-year deal. He has right now the pick of the litter. You have Carlos Rodon and Cody Bellinger that might hang out in this market the longest to get the most money. And maybe a lot of these other guys fall off the board. Who knows? Maybe Chris Bassett, maybe his representation thinks a wait-and-see approach is good for him too, because once Rodon comes off the board, then suddenly it's Senga and Bassett. And all these teams need pitching. The Blue Jays, they want some pitching still. The Mets want pitching. The Yankees want pitching. The Astros technically might want to replace a Justin Verlander. The Dodgers need pitching. Big market teams too. And you wouldn't even count out the Phillies to add another arm. I mean, they got 4 starters right now. The Padres might want to add an arm. There's a lot of pitchers that are still out there. You still have Jose Quintana. You still have Noah Syndergaard. You still have Ross Stripling, who the Mets are reportedly interested in. But those names come off fast. I think Nate Eovaldi is still out there too. I know the Red Sox did offer him a multi-year deal, but maybe he's waiting around. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else off the top of my head here that the Mets could go for. But again, it really does come back to Senga or Bassett, and I think you're going to have to overpay. So the question is, which one can you get for less years to sort of fit this window that you're now building out on? And I think that Chris Bassett on a 4-year deal might make some sense here. Now, what does that look like? Can you find a way to, the dream world here would be a 3-year deal with a conditional 4th-year option. If you had to pay a little bit more on the front end of that, maybe that is something you do. Who knows? Maybe you give them 4 years guaranteed, but you end up really helping your luxury tax bill by deferring some money like you did with Edwin Diaz. I guess that's a possibility. I think if the Mets got Chris Bassett back right now, I would be okay with it, and I would really welcome it because it just depends on the price tag. But if you're telling me that Walker gets 72 for 4 years and the Mets could land Bassett today for $20 million a season, so it's $80 million, and it's $8 million more for a pitcher that I think was pretty clearly better throughout this season, I'm okay with that price tag now, where I probably was a little bit more along the lines of try to get him for 3 for 60, not the 4. I think at this point with where the market is, if you have to guarantee a 4th year, you guarantee a 4th year and you worry about that 4th year when you get to it. Because by the time you get to that 4th year, theoretically, Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer would be off the books. And you would hope that you have some of these younger pitchers, a Dominic Hamill, a Calvin Ziegler, a Matt Allen, the guys that we discussed on that opening day 2025 podcast, that was last Friday maybe. Some of those guys might be cost-controlled, quality big league starters by then. And then if Chris Bassett is the most expensive 5-starter in baseball, it is what it is. So I like Bassett maybe the most now, only because I have no idea how crazy that Senga market could get. Could he end up getting like Tanaka money now? I wouldn't rule it out, and that's a lot of money to pay for a guy that you just don't know about. He has the highest upside, for sure, so I'd be happy with it. I'd be thrilled about it. I'd be pumped up, but I just don't know what the best investment it is here, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's Jose Quintana. Can you get Jose Quintana on a big money 2-year deal? And is that the best option? I think years is really going to come into play, so if that is the case, maybe Quintana becomes their guy. Maybe it's Stripling on a 3-year because maybe he has less track record than a Bassett and he's not as much of a hot commodity as Senga. It's tough. It's tough to find pitching right now. So if you don't do that, the trade market, I'm sure, is going to be inflated prices as well. So now you're giving up more prospects, which the Mets don't want to do to address that rotation. And they can't go into next season without adding at least one more arm. I don't think they're adding 2, though. I'd be shocked if they added 2 starters. It's going to be 1 at this point, I think. It's going to be a middle-of-the-rotation arm. And the 2 guys I would look at, 3 guys really. I'd say it's Senga and Bassett. And then beyond that, I'd say maybe 4. Maybe it's Quintana and Stripling are the ones I'd focus on now that Taijuan apparently is coming off the board. But the Mets made a couple of minor league signings. I don't think we have to spend too much time on those. But also the outfield market is moving, and that is something we have to discuss because is this going to get to the point where the Mets say, you know what, let's just bring back Nimmo? I think it's starting to trend in that direction. The question just is how many years you have to commit to get that done. We're going to discuss all of that in just a minute, but first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number 1 source for your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, they've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. You can find futures odds still, I believe. Carlos Correa might still be on the board. I know Trey Turner, Justin Verlander, you could have bet on where they would land, and they have landed. Head to the website today. Check out what's left over at BetOnline or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so let's start off with the Mets news. They make 3 minor league deals today. Tommy Hunter comes back on a minor league deal. Sean Reed Foley comes back into the mix. And Jimmy Yacobonis. 3 pitchers, some depth guys. The Mets have done a really good job of that. So while you're still concerned about the real depth, the major league depth, they've got a ton of guys in on minor league deals with invites. So you think that will account for some of the needs at the end of the bullpen, the depth arms at the back of the rotation when you get beyond the McGills, the Peterson, McGill, Lucchesi, all those guys. You get to the Elias. I am butchering that name. You know what happened? Adonis Medina left so that I could struggle with Eleazar Hernandez's name, because we all know I like to butcher some names sometimes. So I apologize if I got that one wrong. It is what it is. When he starts pitching for the Mets and I hear Gary Cohen perfect it for me, I usually get a little bit better. And I might have got Medina wrong there too. Whatever. Regardless, the Mets got some depth pieces, but nothing that's really going to be groundbreaking. We'll see how all those guys fare when we get to spring training. Some of them might separate themselves from the pack and deserve a little bit more conversation. But for now, let's switch gears and discuss the outfield market, because there's a couple moves today. You have Mitch Haniger off the board, signs with the Giants, a 3-year deal. It was $43.5 million, I think, off the top of my head. 3 years guaranteed for a guy with injury history. That's interesting. Like, could Michael Conforto get a 3-year deal in this market if he really wanted to? Possibly. Maybe a 2-year. With a Boris client, probably wants an option, but it was interesting to see Haniger go. Bellinger gets 1 year, $17.5 million. Again, kind of goes back over to a Conforto. Like, with a limited outfield market, what are the Conforto, Kiermaiers of the world going to make? Because, for Kiermaier, it's about the defense. For Conforto, it's about the offense that he could provide. They're not great options to replace a Brandon Nimmo, but, that's kind of where you're at in this market. I mean, Bellinger coming off the board is a big hit, but at $17.5 million, I don't blame the Mets for being out on that. And honestly, Bellinger probably wanted to go somewhere where he's more guaranteed to play every single day no matter what. If Bellinger starts off with the Mets in April and he sucks, he's not going to be in the lineup. If he's terrible with the Cubs for the first month, they're going to keep running him out there because they want to try to boost his value to maybe flip him at the deadline. So that makes a lot of sense, and it's a way that he could potentially still win. Also go play for a fun team. Like, there's certain teams that I think players would like to play on, even when they're not necessarily great. The Cubs, the Red Sox, obviously the Yankees are always pretty good, but those are the types of teams I think guys kind of gravitate towards. Even the Reds, I think a lot of players probably enjoy to play there because it's a good fan base, it's a good ballpark, it's a good market for a player to just enjoy themselves and play baseball and really not have to worry about much. So you lose out on a Bellinger, you lose out on a Haniger. What's left? I already mentioned a couple of names, but nothing's attractive. Brian Reynolds is on the trade market. That's going to cost you a ton. I just don't really know what is going to be available other than Nimmo, and that's where you get to a point where it's like, do you just pay him? Do you just say, let's not worry about the injury history? Because all of the injuries he's had, while concerning how many he's had and how limited he has played across his career, the only one that would have scared me if it continued to repeat itself was the neck injury in 2019. Other than that, you have times where he got hit in the hand. You have had some muscle issues, but they haven't really been the same injury. He's just had some bad luck, and this year he stayed healthy, and he even did get hit in the hand a couple times, and you thought, here comes the next Nimmo injury, or he would get pulled from a game because something tightened up on him, and you think, okay, how long is he out? And he came right back out on, and he played. So the more we get through this offseason, the names start to fall off the board, the more it seems like the Mets have to get Nimmo because the alternatives are such a big step back. The problem is you could end up with a contract in your books that isn't going to look good at the end of it. And so you have to weigh the risk reward on that. But I think for a team that's trying to win now, get a deal done with Nimmo. It's the safest bet. And you don't have long-term money on your books. I mean, if you think about beyond the Scherzer-Verlander window, which is really the next 2 years, it's Diaz. You would hope it's Alonso and McNeil. But the books are pretty clean when you get beyond, 2024. So, you have Marte into 2025, but Canna, Escobar come off the book. So I think that you could sign Brandon Nimmo and expect that he can hang out in center field for at least 3 more seasons before you might have to consider finally moving him back into like a left. And during that time, I believe Alex Ramirez will become the starting center fielder of the Mets. And then that'll solve your problems, or maybe we look up in 2025 and it's Alex Ramirez in center, Starling Marte and right, and Brandon Nimmo in left, and everything kind of makes sense. So I'd do it. I think Nimmo would like to come back. I think Nimmo is actually the type of guy that would take a little bit less to remain with the Mets. Not a ton less, and probably not any less years. But maybe he would even be friendly on deferrals. And maybe that's where you kind of game it for yourself, where you give him a heavily deferred contract where he still gets his money, but you can save on that luxury tax AAV. We'll see what happens. Another full day of winter meetings. So who knows if the Mets will make more moves. If they have anything big time, I will come on for a breaking news podcast. Otherwise, we'll be back on Thursday for another edition of Locked On Mets to recap whatever is left from these winter meetings. As always, though, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.